What's up, Simonics, and welcome to an interesting yet very challenging topic. You might have seen that more and more pages are actually offering the Apple sign-in, which was previously just seen on native applications. So today we want to implement sign-in with Apple in an Angular web application and also sync the user to Firebase. That will help us to create a user account within Firebase, and we can use the credentials from the Apple sign-in process. And for this, we're gonna have to go through a lot of configuration and a lot of trial and error. On top of that, we will in the end also add Capacitor to our Angular application, which helps us to easily transform our Angular web application into a container for a native application. Then we will also use a Capacitor plugin to trigger the native sign-in with Apple dialog, because on a real application you don't want to pop up or redirect users somewhere. You can actually do this in a pretty cool native way, and we're gonna do everything of this in this one video. I promise you, I already encountered all the ways that it doesn't work, but I also found out that it certainly does work for both web and native applications. So if you want to check out the source code, link below the video, and if you want to learn more about building mobile applications, also check out the Ionic Academy, which is my online school to help especially Angular developers learn how to build mobile applications using the Ionic framework for the UI of their application, including a lot about Capacitor and plugins and everything that you need to figure out. But now, without further ado, let's dive right into this and implement sign-in with Apple for Angular web applications. Alright, let's begin the fun in Firebase, where we create a new project. So I'm just gonna call this whatever Academy social auth. You can also, of course, use your own project if you already have an existing project. Then go ahead, and of course I hit a typo in the project, but that's not a big problem. So the Firebase setup is kind of, well, optional. In our case, we need it since we want to create Firebase users and use the pop-up from Firebase for Apple. But usually you could also do this directly with a Apple JS SDK on the web if you wanted to. Anyway, we're here in our application. We need to add a new web application, so we later get a configuration for that project. So simply give it a name, hit add, and then we can copy this, or we can leave it like it is. Let's just leave it like it is. What we need as well is to enable the Firestore database, since we want to later create user objects in there, and we're going to start in test mode. So basically all requests are authenticated. In reality, of course, you should have the appropriate security rules for Firebase in place. It's just that it's a bit easier right now for our testing case. Once we got Firestore enabled, we also need to enable authentication for our project. Are you done already? Okay, do this in the background? Like, this shouldn't be too hard. Okay, thanks. Inside authentication, we can also click Get Started, which should hopefully be a bit faster. So then we can select the Apple provider, enable it, and then we're gonna have to fill in some data. So we're just gonna keep this window open. I'm gonna put it to the side so we can copy it in later, because now we will continue within Apple. Yes, if you want to add Apple sign-in, you need an Apple developer account, just like if you wanted to develop mobile applications. And now it's gonna be tricky. First of all, we need to head over to identifiers and create a new app ID, or use your existing app ID if you already have one. So I'm gonna call this web auth video, and I'm gonna give it an explicit bundle ID, something like this, comdevdectic Apple auth video. So I can go with this. Additionally, we can scroll down and click sign in with Apple, enable. It is set as primary ID. That is fine. We can just keep it like it is, and then hit continue and register. And then our ID should be created. I already forgot about the name. What was the name? Apple auth video. Okay, it's important, because now we're gonna switch over to service IDs, and we create a new service ID. We can click continue, we can give it a name, web auth service video. I just need to identify this later. And then we need another ID in here. Let's pick comdevdectic web auth video service. That's a good name. Okay, click continue, click register, and then once it's created, we can go into this again and select enable sign in with Apple, hit configure, and then we can select the app ID we just created before. So comdevdectic Apple Auth video was the one we created. Now it gets interesting because we need to register web URLs, and those come exactly from our Firebase project. So right here is the domain that's usually used as a redirect URL. I'm gonna put it in this one, and I'm also adding the domain in here. I'm not sure if this is completely required, but I felt good about doing it. Of course, if you host your application in the end on your own page, I think you should add your own domain here. And for the return URL, I'm actually not 100% sure if you should use your own domain for the return URL. I think you will keep it even in that case to Firebase, but that's something you can figure out in the future. For now, we're gonna roll with this. Also, we can see that, let's hit done first of all, that this is the identifier for our service, and we can bring that identifier already into Firebase. So let's make this a bit bigger. Service ID, this is where we want to insert our service ID. I'm gonna hit save, and that's cool. But we're gonna need a bit more information for the OAuth code flow to make everything work in the end. So let's put this to the side once again. And now we go to keys. Within keys, we're gonna create a new key. I'm gonna call this Apple Auth video key, something like this, and I want to enable sign in with Apple for this key. So this key will be used for our Firebase configuration. In here, I click configure again, and once again, I select the web auth video primary ID. This is once again our app ID. Then I can click continue. Apple sign in should be enabled, and I can register this. So this will give me a key ID. And I'm going to copy over the key ID and put it into Firebase. And I also need a team. This is just my team ID up here. So I'm going to put the team as well in here in this dialog. And then I need this private key. And once you register your key, you can download a JSON file. And I'm just going to put this into my terminal with cat. And then I can read the message. Copy the message, back to Firebase, insert it, and hit save. Now, that was easy, wasn't it? I really never went through this process before, but it's actually quite okay, I would say. So now you should have all the information, the service ID, your Apple team ID, the key ID, the message, you have defined the redirect handler for the service, and everything is basically done. Okay, I think at least. That means we can now focus on our Angular web application. So I already created a blank new application running ng-new, giving it the project a name, using a routing file, and so also styling. But actually, we don't really need that. It doesn't really matter. It's just my preference. Then I've also generated a new component for our login, so we can do this in a clean fashion. And then I also installed Capacitor Core and the Capacitor Community plugin. Why Capacitor? Because by default, our application, of course, is just an Angular web application. And if you want to bundle this to mobile, you need Capacitor. So for this, you need to install the core and the CLI. Did we already have that? We're going to do this in the end when we build our app. But for now, this is what we need to use the actual plugin for Apple sign-in on a mobile device. Now, if you're not interested in mobile device or mobile sign-in, native sign-in, you can basically just leave all the Capacitor stuff out. What we need to run as well is the most important part. It's ng add Angular file. So I'm going to list this out in here as well, just for reference. because this will create the connection to Firebase within our project. Would you like to proceed? Yes, of course I want. Then it will hopefully install the packages and also update our project in a way that we need, hopefully in the end, not many changes anymore. If it's not working with the changes, we can already open our project settings. We anyway need to head there and go here, because here we can find our Firebase config. But let's see. What features would you like to set up? Yeah, let's set up deploy, authentication, Firestore. Yeah, actually that sounds good to me. So let's see what this does. Yeah, this is my account. Now you can select your project. I gave it the name Academy. What was it? Yeah, actually it was the very first element. Create new site. Yeah, do whatever you think is right. Please select an app. Just go with a web. And this will now download my configuration. Great, I like this. Because now you should be able to go to your environment, and the schematic has pulled in your environment. So this is the information we can usually find in here inside our web app. At least I hope it's the same information. Also, that should be in the production environment. Yes, perfect, perfect. We got this, we got this. Okay, cool. Let's head over to our app module for some general changes. Well, you already did all of this for me. This is quite nice. So this is the new way of using Angular Fire. Wow, this is so cool. The schematic got way better over time. These three imports were added to initialize our Firebase app based on the configuration file. We also need the authentication provider, and we need access to the Firestore database. So these three lines are required. Now, I'm sure you didn't do what comes next, because for our routing, we're gonna now define a little path in here. So let's say for the empty path, we wanna show our login component. Path, oh yeah, component, login component. And then we can change our app component HTML and basically delete everything and just keep the last line, because that will render our login route. And we can even run now ngserve-o, so our application should be opened in a second with live reload. Great. Now we can head over to the login component and implement our actual flow. So, okay, we can see it works. That's good. Good news, very good news, in fact. Let's make this a bit smaller, and there we go. So now we got our nice preview of our web application, and we can implement the sign-in. Okay, let's close this. What we need is, first of all, to inject the auth instance, as we need to pass this to different calls along the way. We're gonna inject it from Angular Fire auth package. And we also need the Firestore reference, so we'll add that one as well. Then let's create a function that we call open sign in. And within that function, we're gonna have a little switch, because there's a tiny problem with the Capacitor plugin. So normally a Capacitor plugin has different implementations for Android, iOS, and the web. This plugin has a nice implementation for all platforms, but on the web there's a problem with the redirect. So at the time creating this tutorial, it didn't work completely. So sign in on the web, not redirecting. If this is closed in the future, you can just use this plugin, which will make life really a lot easier. But for now, we're gonna have to use a little fallback. So we're gonna add this, which we can also easily do with Capacitor, and check if the underlying platform currently is web. So in that case, we're gonna implement a sign-in with Apple for the web. And in the other case, we're gonna sign in natively, because that's pretty amazing. And on a native device, you don't wanna do it with a web pop-up or anything like that. We can also add a little logout function already. So this.auth logout. No. Actually, it's this.auth sign out, not logout, but we're gonna get to that later. Besides that, let's start with sign in for the web. Let me show you how we can do this. The code basically comes from the Firebase documentation. So first of all, you create a new provider, which is a new OAuth provider, and then you specify the provider ID, which in this case is apple.com. Then you go ahead and call either sign in with redirect or sign in with pop-up. I actually think that sign in with pop-up is on the web the better way, because sign in with redirect will completely change your page and then in the end come back. So we're gonna go with sign in with a pop-up. We specify our auth instance, and as the second value, we need the provider, which is our provider, of course. Okay, this should return a promise, so we can call then on the promise, and we should hopefully get back a user credential result right in here. Cannot find name user credential. Yeah, then just import it, please. That was the whole idea. With this information, with the user credential, we can probably just log this out for now. And maybe we can already just do a little button and test this, because I think it should actually work. So let's do this. Let's add a click event, sign in with Apple Web, sign in with Apple, and then close this. And let's see. We got our button, so let's try this. Okay, nice. We can see it actually goes to our Firebase URL, and then we get an invalid client. This is actually, it's pretty good that it happens at this point. All right, let's see if it works now. So I'm gonna select this. I'm gonna go with my email. I'm gonna click continue. And then it works. And I can also tell you why it didn't work before. First of all, I have a lot of confusion about the different IDs. So I didn't use the right team ID and key ID and mixed this up. Also, within my service, within Apple, I didn't have the, within the service, I didn't have the sign-in enabled. For whatever reason, I didn't follow through. So those were definitely two issues, but the more important issue was, as far as I know, the imports used in my Angular application. So for the sign-in with pop-up and the OAuth provider, you should use them from the real JS Firebase authentication package. I used them from Angular Fire, or I had a mix of these things, which most likely led to a lot of confusion internally and therefore didn't really work. As a result, I can go into Firebase and I now see the user with the email. So this is so great. It took me like half an hour to figure this out, really. It was horrible. Now, where do we continue? Well, probably want to display some user information. So let's create a little user object on our page. We can use this from Firebase Auth or from Angular Fire, doesn't matter too much, I think. And then we can subscribe to the onAuth changed event and just catch the new user state and just assign this to this.user. Actually, we could do this in one line, I think, but we're going to keep it like this. So let's put in a log user changed, and then we should be able to print this out. So therefore, let's open the HTML once again, and let's just add a little button. I'm going to make it like this, so we'll give it a bit of margin, because on the mobile device without any framework like Ionic UI, it won't really look great. So now we got those two buttons. We also got a logout button. Let's give it a try. I go sign in with Apple. I actually used my email before. I don't know why always the second one is selected. Okay, so do you want to continue? Because I already did this before. Yes, that's fine. And then we get back a lot of data, the access token, email, nothing too interesting at that point. Only thing to mention is actually that once you do this for the second time, you still get the email. I thought usually you don't get back the email the second time you do this call. But probably this was also the first, because I removed the user. So that's kind of, the middle ground. Also, if you want to test this completely on your Mac, you can go to your Apple ID password security, click on edit here, and then find the entry where you used your Apple ID. In my case, this is, what's the name of this? Something Academy, Academy, whatever. Web auth Simon Grimm. Stop using Apple ID, stop using, and then you should be able to use the whole process from the beginning again. Because what we also want to implement now or add is a little function to update the user data after the first sign up. So we can just add a new function, update user data, which will get a user object. Then we can create a reference to a document in our Firestore by using the unique user ID, which we already have at that point. And then just add some data like the user email and then set a document in our database, because usually you want to keep the users in Firebase not only here in the users tab, but you also want to have them inside the real Firestore database. And that's what we're trying to achieve with this. So we can just call update user data right in here after we sign in with pop-up. And for this, we're just going to use the user object, which is in the user credential result. Now, this should work, hopefully. Maybe we're going to go through it one last time. What's this? Actually not sure. So let's hit one more time this. You see, I don't have any user yet. I'm going to go through this. This will now, again, because I disabled this in my Mac settings, allow me to see this dialog. I can hide my email. It will use the redirect. We get back here. And then, oh, we don't have any permissions to write here. Didn't we start this? Yeah, the rules. That was where I was in the beginning very, very fast. So for whatever reason, I didn't use the testing rules and I had read write if false in here, which means nobody basically is allowed to do this. So we can do this once again. You see, the whole process is really, it's challenging to implement. You can go wrong in a lot of places. You need to reset IDs. You sometimes don't get the right error code. It's kind of annoying and frustrating at the same time. Let's hope it works now without resetting everything again. So we should have a new user in here, and now we should finally have a user in here. That is very good news, because that means Apple sign in on the web. We're done with that. Now, if you also want to build a mobile application from your Angular web application, we can easily do this. For this, we're going to first of all reset our data once again. So I'm going to remove the users in here, and I'm going to remove the user from here as well. And then we're going to go through a few steps. First of all, let's implement the code for sign-in with Apple Native. First of all, we need to create a new object with these settings. And we can import the sign-in with Apple options from the Capacitor community Apple sign-in plugin that we installed in the beginning. So what we need in here is a client ID, which is my app ID. Now, it gets confusing. Don't confuse this with your service ID. This is now really the app ID. I think this was the app ID I wanted to use. So I'm going to use this one and put it in here. Then we got the redirect URI, which points to our Firebase application, just like we had before. Then just make sure you put in yours. So I'm going to put in this. Probably you could even use this from the environment. So most likely I would specify this in the environment normally. Then once we got this, we can call sign in with Apple from our community package. We pass in the options, and then we get, oh no, of course we need to call authorize with the options. And then we should get back a result, which is of the type, I think, sign in with Apple response, exactly. So this will give us some nice typings. Let's put a log in here, result. And what I said before is this doesn't work on the web yet because of the bug I've shown you on GitHub. But in the future, it should definitely work. But anyway, at this point, once you get back the result on a native device, you can still follow through with a new provider. and creating credentials from the identity token of the result, and then simply creating the actual user by calling sign in with credential from an Angular Fire auth. If you can't use await, just make sure you're adding the async keyword in front of your function. So this will create a new user or sign in the user within Firebase, and then we can follow up with updating our user data. So we create an entry in the user's collection. That's really everything we need for mobile. We already got the switch in here. So on a mobile device, it will actually use sign in with Apple Native. And now we just need to add our mobile platform using Capacitor. We can do this pretty easily. First of all, you need to install the Capacitor CLI. You can also install it globally if you plan to use it more often. If you don't plan to use it more often, then just install it locally in the project. It's anyway a bit safer. Then call npx cap init, which will initialize Capacitor in your project. I can use that name. For the bundle ID, I don't want that. I actually want to use my own bundle ID. And once again, this is the one we had before in Apple, not the service one. This is the app ID. Then go ahead and install Capacitor or add Capacitor iOS, which is the package so we can add the native iOS platform. And then finally run npx cap init add iOS. npx is executing a local script of your package.json. That's the whole reason why we installed the Capacitor CLI as a development dependency. Now, if we read the warning carefully, you see sync could not run missing dist directory. Capacitor normally looks for the dist directory in your project. You can find this inside the Capacitor config. But usually with Angular, if you build your application, it will be here. So you can run ng build, and this should create a new build folder up here, and with a new dist folder, and inside the dist folder, you should have the Academy auth package. Also, whenever you want to update your native iOS application, you first need to run the ng build. And once you're done with the ng build, let's also already open my iPhone. Once you're done with the build, you run npx cap sync, which will sync your web assets to the iOS folder. And when this is done, you can run npx cap open iOS, which will bring up Xcode, the native development environment, to build iOS applications. Now we need to do two things in our project. First is we need to go to the signing capabilities and select my own team. Otherwise, it won't pick up the right provisioning profiles. If you haven't done this, you can just configure this with Xcode. But again, you need a developer account within Apple in the Apple developer program. And the second thing for our native app is that we need to add a capability. Scroll down. This is now pretty easy. Just select sign in with Apple. It will look up the stuff on the app ID. So if you haven't configured the app ID correctly, which we did in the first step, you would see an issue. But hopefully we did everything right, which means we should now be able to simply run the application on our connected device. Here we go. There is the application. And I'm gonna take a look at the log messages on the side as well. So let's try sign in with Apple. It will bring up the dialog. I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna sign in. Because my Apple ID already used this, there's no further confirmation. But we see a problem. The audience in ID token does not match the expected audience. So this is so much fun to develop. Oh, I think I know this one. When we first set up our Firebase application, we only added to the settings a web application. Now, I think to magically make this work, we also need to add the iOS application, and we need to put in, no, not this, but the real bundle ID of the application. I'll call this iOS app. We don't need the App Store ID. Just make sure that you're using the bundle ID, which is your app ID. We don't need the plist as far as I know. So we don't really need anything of the rest. Just make sure that we got this. So we got Apple Auth video in here. We got Apple Auth video in here. I feel confident that it could work now. So let's give it another try. Sign in with Apple. I hit continue, sign in. And please be, no, the audience ID token Apple Auth video does not match the expected web auth video service. These error messages and everything that's going on in the background is so complicated with Apple sign in and Firebase. Let me try to figure this last problem out. All right, let's try it one more time, then I will let you know what I changed. So sign in with Apple, continue, it's me, done. And then we finally see the result. Oh damn, this was taking like 10 tries. I actually didn't change a lot. Actually, I think I didn't change anything. I just added a bunch of logs in here, which we can definitely remove. So the other catch block, I made sure that sign in with credential and user credential is used from Angular Fire Auth. So no change in there actually. Pretty much I checked everything that's possible in our application. So I made sure that I had the right IDs here, that for the native application I used the right IDs, that for the sign-in I had everything here set up correctly, and pretty much that's all it takes, because once you got everything aligned, I just feel that at some point it was mostly a problem of debugging this and just doing things too often. I also had a space in here for some time, which probably didn't help to have a space in your client ID. But overall, this process works as you've seen. We've seen it both work here. We've seen it work in here if I sign in correctly. I hope that I now didn't mess up this project. That would be quite, please work as well. Please do. Okay, this one works as well. So it definitely works at the same time on the web and on iOS. Again, you can find the code linked below the video, as some parts were pretty challenging. And also the imports, I'm not sure if they have to be from these packages, but this setup definitely worked as you have seen. Alright, and that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this. It was a very challenging topic. Preparing this topic up front already took some time, and I encountered all the problems, and then when I recorded it, I encountered the problems again, which just shows that this process of integrating sign-in with Apple is actually not that easy. So if you go wrong, if it doesn't work the first time, just go through this stuff and check it out. Did you use the right IDs, the right keys? Did you add the right information in the right place? Are you having the imports from the right packages? Really, there's a lot that you can do wrong, and the error messages are certainly not that helpful. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did so, please leave a like and subscribe for more great videos about how to build mobile applications as a web developer in the future, and I will certainly catch you next week. Like always, so happy coding, Simon.